If you like the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment. For more videos like this. What was the creepiest thing you witnessed that made you believe in supernatural stuff? In January of 2010, I was driving to Los Angeles after spending the holidays with family. I 40 the whole way. After a long day of driving, I stopped at Holbrook, Arizona to get a hotel for the night. I get the room, pull around to the back parking lot and park my car. I open the back door and start to grab my bags and get my stuff together I was going to take inside for the night. All of a sudden, I hear a crazy sounding roar. The closest I can come to describing it is that it sounded like a mixture of a bear roaring, a pig squealing, and a baby crying. I freeze, look up, and standing on the edge of the raised parking lot next door was some kind of man-dog thing. It was probably around 7 to 8 foot tall. I look at it, it roars again, and I take off running towards my hotel room. I get to the door scared shitless, fumbling with my key card, and it roars again like it's just to the left of me. I get the key in the door, lock the door and run in the bathroom and lock that door too. I sat there for maybe 30 minutes. Then I grabbed the pillows and blankets off the bed and slept in the bathtub all night with the door locked. I started searching on my phone for what the hell that was, and that was the night I learned about skinwalkers. If that exists, then what the hell else does that isn't supposed to? What was almost just as crazy is that when I bolted towards my room, I left my car unlocked and the doors wide open. They stayed open all night and nothing was taken or stolen. And I had a bunch of music equipment in there. But yeah, be careful on the edges of a Navajo reservation. I lived in the middle of nowhere in Ireland growing up. A friend and I were camping outside in our field. We hear this singing in the middle of the night. My friend unzips the tent and looks out. He wakes me up and tells me to come look. There in the middle of the field is a woman. Pure white skin, blonde hair, dress made of some really light flowing fabric. Tunic-like. She's walking slowly across the field singing in Gaelic. I still have everything burned in my mind, from how she looked to how she sounded. Her voice was light but yet kind of raspy. Everything about her was ephemeral. My friend wanted to go talk to her. I pulled him back into the tent and we ended up hiding in our sleeping bags till the next morning. I'm almost 100% sure it was a fae. We were too far away from other people for it to have been a random person. Another one is I saw a ball of light over a nearby field another night. It hovered about 10 feet off the ground and then sped off over the field ridiculously fast. Then it disappeared into a hedge. No idea what it was. I'm a skeptic when it comes to ghosts, aliens, monsters, etc. But I'm a believer when it comes to the fae. Those fuckers are real, and they ain't the little Tinkerbell-like things. Fae are tall, beautiful and dangerous. So basically my family heavily believes that when someone passes away, they come back as something else. On my grandpa's last day, he said he would come back as a white butterfly. He knew exactly when he was going to die. He may have been somewhat psychic. A few days before, his doctor told him he would pass away in 2 to 3 days, but he corrected him saying he would die in 5 days, exact, and he did just that. The following is what my grandma told me. I was about 5 or 6 around the time. The rest of my family and I were quite devastated when he died. But as we were leaving the hospital, the most interesting thing happened in front of my grandma's eyes. Apparently little 5 to 6-year-old me was surrounded by white butterflies. Being the giggly child I was laughing at all the butterflies around me. Just as my grandpa said before dying, he'd come back as a white butterfly. So this was confirming our belief that people come back as something else after death. My grandma said that the butterflies just disappeared into thin air before her and my aunt's eyes. Yes, my aunt saw it all too. They both recently talked about it. I'm almost 17 now and so many things are increasing my beliefs in the supernatural. The rest of my family too also believes in it. I have a version of sleep paralysis, so as terrifying as it can be, I'm generally pretty used to waking up to seeing things. I was on a road trip with my friend and we were staying in a hotel off of Route 66. I went to sleep before her and she stayed up to watch television on her phone. We turned the lights off and I started to doze off. Every so often, I'd wake up to her panning her phone light to the area in between our beds. After a little while, she got up to go to the bathroom. I woke up once or twice to see a dark figure of a woman standing in between our 2 beds looking at me. Being exhausted from driving and prone to hallucinating when I sleep, I thought nothing of it. A bit later, I woke up to the sound of a door slamming and my friend crossing the room and climbing into bed. She was laying directly on her side, stiff as a board, staring at me. I yelled, "What the fuck, Mary?" and turned on the light. But there was no one there. My scream brought Mary out of the bathroom though, and I just told her I had a nightmare. Later that night, I woke up again to see the woman standing in between our beds. But this time, she moved over to the desk in the room, seemingly writing something. I quietly said Mary's name, but before I could say anything else, Mary cut me off, asking, "Landon Fontaine, is that you?" We turned on the lights and stared at each other for a minute. She started to ask me what I'd seen, but I cut her off and told her that we were both too tired to get on the road at 3 in the morning and we'd already paid for the room. We slept with the lights on in the same bed for the rest of the night. The next morning as we were driving away, we compared notes. She said she kept flashing her phone light because she kept seeing the shadow of a woman standing between our beds. It freaked her out so much that she went into the bathroom to watch TV with the lights on. She saw the woman walk over to the desk as well. We now both have tattoos commemorating the terrifying road trip from hell. I'm Native American, enrolled to the Crow tribe. So the supernatural stuff isn't really creepy to us, cause we know there are spirits upon this earth with us. As a kid I heard many stories of these types of stuff, so I never fear anything unnatural, but instead respect them and know they are true. Anyways, when I was a kid, my uncles, brothers and I all went fishing one time at Fort Smith, Mount. It's a beautiful place to fish and stuff, and a well-known fishing spot. We spent the whole day fishing there from about noon till it was time to leave. The sun was setting, and the sky started turning its gray color. Just as this was happening, my uncle said, "Do you hear that?" And I stopped what I was doing and started listening for something. In a distance I could hear a drum beating in a double beat, the type of sound you'll hear at a powwow, but instead with no song. We sat there for just a minute or two listening. As it flowed with the river the drum gotten louder and sounded closer. My uncle said it was time to go. So we got all of our food that we brought with us, and threw it all in the river as a gift to them for letting us fish. I asked them who or what they were, and they told me it was the water people. Usually this type of stuff is creepy and scares one, but it fascinates me and I love to know these spirits and unnatural things are real and alive. When I lived in Italy, I was helping a Nigerian man who lived there with a few things. His son had been a troublemaker and part of my job at the time was to help put together a plan on how to make things better for him at home. Whenever I come over it seems like a perfect home life, but the son, 17 years, hated being there and never said why. As I come over more often, it starts to seem a little surreal. Then the dad, who'd been incredibly friendly, said something about my sister at home when I realized I never told him about my sister. The second I realized that, despite saying nothing, everything felt off and weird and the dad was very hostile. Once I got home I thought on it a lot and felt very unsettled. I called the next week to cancel our appointment cause it felt wrong and the dad was outright hostile and aggressive toward me. The following week I had a quick appointment with another Nigerian man who I had been friends with for over a year. He told me, as I was about to leave, to be careful because there was darkness around me. I hadn't said anything, but I was going to see the father and his son. I was sweating and anxious as I knocked on the door, and the dad opened up with an angry look on his face. Without saying a word he shoved me hard enough to knock me down. He started walking toward me and behind him I could see into the apartment which looked nothing like I remembered. Paint was peeling from the walls and the place looked disgusting and smelled foul, even from 6+ feet away. I stood up and shoved him back, and called for his son, immediately worried about him. The son came into view as the father got up and looked like he was going to leap for me. The son yelled "Go!" And I ran. I felt dirty after and called the cops, but they found nothing at the apartment. My Nigerian friend told me that the man was definitely a witch doctor or something and it was hard to believe at first, but now I can't help but wonder. A few years ago I was camping out in the woods of Wisconsin and I decided to sleep in a hammock overnight. At some point I woke up cause I thought I heard something moving but I dismissed it as some animal. I'm in the middle of the woods so it made sense. I started to go back to sleep but I started to hear something else that really freaked me out. It was the distinct sound of someone breathing right next to me. I was really scared but I couldn't see who it was because I slept with part of a sleeping bag over my head. I just tried to stay quiet and hope it would stop but after a long time I still heard it. I like to face my fears so I tried to slowly get out of the hammock and see what was there. Unfortunately the hammock was pretty small and instead of slowly getting out I just fell straight to the ground. I was terrified that I would look up and see someone but there was nobody there. It was basically pitch black around me so I didn't bother to go search. Instead I just got back in the hammock and tried to fall asleep. I was awake for most of the night after that but I never heard the breathing again. Still kinda freaks me out today. When I was still dating my ex, we traveled to a fairly well-known spot in Brazil where folks say there are UFOs, magical quartz caves, good spirits, and the like. This spot is also famous for its natural beauty, waterfalls, hiking spots, mountains, and for being pretty much a popular stoner's destination. I was there for the natural beauty, and because I had never traveled without my family, she was there for the natural beauty and the weird spiritual vibe that came from smoking marijuana atop a pyramid watching the sunset. We made reservations for 5 days at a local hostel, and it was pretty much fantastic. We visited waterfalls, watched the sunset more than once, had fun at the local bars, enjoyed the local cuisine. The region is also famous for its traditional cooking, and even made fast friends with a couple that was there also on vacations. We hitched some rides, walked pretty much everywhere. Everything felt safe, everything felt nice. And me, being the stupid guy I am, suggested we should wake up early the morning of the 4th day to watch the sunrise. She agreed. There was a mountaintop 20 minutes away that would be perfect, it sounded safe, and if the sunset was amazing, just imagine what the sunrise is like. We went to bed, had some fun, we both fell asleep. And then, I'll wake up at 3 in the morning. I wake up, sit, and the only thing in my head is an alarm going grifo colio. There is something out of this hostel, wanting blood, and if you step outside now, you are going to die. I try to rationalize. I try to calm down. My body is tense, I feel as if my skin is hardening, all my hair is standing. I think about reaching for the light switch, but the alarm in my head is still on. Grifo colio, you do not want to move, it will follow. You are only safe if you stay right where you are. My blood is curling, I am cold to the touch. There is just this dread I can't source. My eyes are squinting, I am almost crying. I look to the window, which is closed. I know something is waiting outside. A few years earlier, I saw my mother almost dead, passed out. I saw my brother with his forehead and chin pumping blood. I got knocked out while underwater in a pool. I had a guy hold me at knife point. Nothing ever felt as real and as terrorizing as that morning. Sat in my bed, knowing deep inside that if I stepped out of that room, I'd die. My then girlfriend woke up, noticed I was tense, asked what was up. I said we should not get out of the room till sunrise. That I knew something bad would happen. She agreed and went back to sleep. We never touched again on the subject. We enjoyed the remaining of the 4th and 5th days, and the dread was gone. We went back to our regular lives. We broke up somewhere in May, 2015. I told some friends of the travel, never spoke about the dread I felt that morning. Then a friend of mine decided to go. Enjoyed the hell out of it. Went with a girl he was seeing at the time. He was happy as a pig in shit when he got back. And a few months and some beers after that, he just said, you know, grifo colio, it was amazing, but there was something that got me worried. I had almost forgotten of the story by then, but the way he said it just made me remember everything. When I was near the wind portal, late into the night, I heard something talking. Our hostel room, when we visited, was near the wind portal. We did arrange to see the sunrise there. I felt the same sensations I had a year prior. I asked if he dreaded it. He just swallowed another beer can and replied, dead serious, I am pretty sure it was some kind of devil, trying to lure us, but I also am pretty sure that it must have been something else. It was talking to something, or someone, and I did not want to hear it. I just got out of there as fast as I could. I then proceeded to blurt out my story. Silence came afterwards. We went for a few more beers, went both to our homes afterwards. And we agreed that there was something wrong there. That this idyllic little town encrusted in the mountainside of Minas Gerais had something very good, but held also something very bad there. Something heinous, and hungry. If you guys ever want to travel there, it is called São Tomé das Letras. It is not difficult to get there, but takes quite a lot of time. It is a little, sympathetic town, with stone streets, 2 churches, maybe 2 or 3 bars, about a dozen waterfalls and some nice views. It also hosts a modern rustic pyramid built atop one of the mountains and many, many little stones that tourists stack as to say that they were there and did leave no trash behind. Ours must still be there, I think. But stay away from the wind portal at the dead of night. Something evil lurks there. I used to be an atheist, full skeptic, not believing in any remote chance of the supernatural. But that single experience made me worry that maybe there are some things we do not know, and, among these, some that which we are not meant to. Early 2000s. 13 years old. House phone with no caller ID. I was home alone and had locked myself in my parents' bedroom to feel safe when I received several phone calls from a stranger with a gruff voice. The stranger repeatedly asked me what I was doing. I was watching The Simpsons, so I told it I was watching The Simpsons. Then the stranger says, "No. What are you doing locked in your parents' bedroom like a little bitch?" I freaked out and phoned my family for help. Brother? Station states away. Parents? 3 hours away. Sister? 2 hours away. Cousin who lived with us. At work for another hour. Whatever is calling, and knows my specific location, and that the door is locked, is calling in my perfect isolation. As an idiot 13-year-old, I don't think to call the police. My family says it's fine, no one is after me, probably just a prank call. The stranger calls a final time. Says, "Why don't you open the door for me?" Right as my parents' locked bedroom door is bombarded with heavy, banging knocks. The phone is dead. I'm crying, praying, cursing. Eventually the knocks subside. Eventually I step outside. No one's there. I grab a knife and clear every bedroom. No one's there. Every window and door is locked. To this day, I've no fucking clue what called and knocked. I just hope it never happens again. When I lived in Houston, my roommate's 5-year-old daughter got terribly sick, and despite taking her to Jefferson Davis Hospital, DRS couldn't figure it out. In the meantime, this little girl got sicker and sicker till she could hardly lift her head. Then the neighbor across the street brought a witch over and said she knew what to do. This old woman, who spoke no English, looked the little girl over, then had my roommate bring her a plain juice glass and an egg. The women prayed over the two items, then broke the egg over the glass and set egg and glass in the bedroom window. We were told under no circumstance to touch the glass. We all went to bed, and the next morning I awoke to my roommate screaming from her daughter's room, and I thought the little girl had died. But to my astonishment, the little girl was sitting up in bed all bright-eyed, telling her mom she was hungry. When we looked in the glass, the egg had turned this really revolting shade of red and black and smelled worse than something dead in the heat. The little girl continued to improve and amazed the doctors. The old witch told the friend across the street that someone put the evil eye on the little girl. Made a believer out of me. So this is the first time I've commented something on here, but I think this occurrence is something worth mentioning, and maybe some of you can give me some input of what you think might have happened. I'm not great at telling stories, so please bear with me. One night my friend and I decided to go on a night hike. It's a well-known trail with a great overlook of the city. It's about a 45-minute hike to the overlook. This trail is in the Santa Barbara Mountains of California, so it's pretty green and foresty for as much as Santa Barbara can get. Well, once on top, we decided to drink some beers. We were both probably one beer in when this giant bright red light overtook us from behind. I of course thought it was just me, but as I looked at him I realized he saw it also. This light was so bright and intense that we assumed probably a meteorite burned up in the atmosphere behind us or something, but then we realized that the light only encompassed us and not the entire area. This did scare us, but we tried to play it off again as maybe our minds getting the best of us or the nearby military base doing something. Not soon after, we started to hear movement in the bushes to the right of us, then to the left. We started to shout, asking if anyone was there. Maybe there were other people on the trail we didn't see, and maybe they've come up after us and had taken a picture of us from behind, but no answer. But the real dread didn't start to kick in until I realized that we hadn't heard a single animal or insect since the flash. I knew that something was off, and almost instantly after realizing this I was almost certain that I was going to die. I was certain that we weren't the only two beings on that mountain that night. I can't explain what I felt, but I have never felt a sensation like that before. My body felt like it wanted to shut down and my mind was paralyzed in fear. Finally, we came to the conclusion that we had to leave that instant or else we wouldn't be making it out alive. With the empty bottles in our hand, we decided to make our way back to the beginning of the trail to descend the mountain. No matter what I did or where I turned, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched as I walked. Thankfully, as we got to the entrance of the trail, I saw a tarantula carelessly walking in front of me, and with that my uneasiness was evaporated. I'm pretty sure I used that little gal as a sign that if there was something menacing a couple feet of us, that she wouldn't have been walking about. So to this day I have no idea what caused that light, nor if something else was really out there, but what I do know is that tarantulas ain't give no fucks. My brother and I were exploring an old abandoned paper mill one night. I had been there dozens of times and my brother had probably been 2 to 3 times. All of those times had been during the day, as the place could be really dangerous if you didn't know the layout. You could literally fall 3 stories onto rubble and steel or get lost in the many ever dark subterranean corridors. Anyway, this particular night we had all the appropriate gear with us to just hang out, smoke a few bowls and have a few drinks while listening to home music. We were in a huge open room that had several dead-end rooms off of it at the back and corridors that lead out the other 3 directions. We had everything set up in the back room as it was cold in there and the acoustics were best with our tiny speaker. There was a designated pee spot just out the corridor, as it led outside, which is where I went to relieve myself, leaving my brother alone in the big room dancing to the music. I was maybe a minute and a half tops, but on the walk back I noticed the music has stopped, which was weird as the speaker and my phone both had near full charge. Now keep in mind it's pitch black outside the flashlight beam except for a few glow sticks placed around the back wall. As I walk into the large room, I see my brother 20 off to my right facing the wall, slowly kicking some loose rubble/debris at it. He's got a weird hunch to him, as if he's sifting through the debris looking for something, probably his lighter. I'm thinking, he's dropped. I turn my light off as I take my next few steps to get a fresh beer. I'm about 10 to 12 behind him now. I can clearly hear the sound of him shuffling through what sounded like shale. I asked him something like, "Did you lose your lighter? Or a bud or something?" No response. My words echoed. Just more foot shuffling with his back to me. At this point I thought he was just fucking around trying to give me a scare. Anyway, I laughed and told him it was a good try, and my next words were frozen in my throat. I hear a booming what? From over my left shoulder. It was my fucking brother. I instantly went white, felt my heart drop, and broke into a crazy sweat all in a half second. I whipped around to see him coming through the other corridor, glow stick around his neck and beer in hand. I was shaking and thought I was going to throw up for about 5 minutes after that. It turns out he had to pee as well and just went down the other way. I have no idea how to explain what I saw or heard that night, but I know for sure I did experience it. To this day I'll hear that certain tone of the rocks kicked across the ground in an almost echo chamber, and it gives me chills. My brother was so freaked out that I was so freaked out that we packed up and left immediately. He thought I was trying to freak him out. It was another 10-minute walk to get off the property, and we were talking about what had just happened. He hadn't seen or heard anything unusual except for me talking to myself. I asked him why he shut the music off if he was only going for a pee, which he thought I did while he was gone. This was when Bluetooth was still pretty expensive to have a decent speaker, so it was a wired unit. Neither of us touched the phone and everything was working properly and charged up. We listened to music all the way home. This was just over 10 years ago, and I still get freaked out when I think about it. I'm visiting family in St. Catharines, Ontario, Canada, and it's at my uncle's house. The setup is interesting, so bear with me. My uncle is about to remarry, and it's the day before the wedding at his house. His previous wife had passed away in their house a few years beforehand. She had died in the main floor bedroom across from the dining room. I'm downstairs and I'm playing Nintendo, and I decide that I'm hungry. I get up and start walking up the stairs, and I get this feeling that I am not alone, like how you feel another presence in the room. I stop and turn around halfway up the stairs and look down, and some so strange. I see this black mist pooling in the middle of the floor, and it starts rapidly forming into a human shape, and I recognize it as my uncle's dead wife, but all dressed in black, but her features are obscured. I run up the stairs and into the living room with my family. The living room is filled with my cousins and my grandmother. I hide beside the couch. I hear something coming from the dining room. My aunt used to wear these heavy nursing type shoes, a very distinctive sound on hardwood floor to say the least. So all of us hear this sound of someone walking in the dining room. My grandmother and all of us peek into the dining room and see this solid black form walk across the dining room. We all briefly exchanged looks as if to say, "Are we seeing this?" The form walks across the dining room and down the hallway towards the bedroom where she died. My grandmother speaks up before any of us can say anything, and she whispers out, "Mary?" The form doesn't stop, doesn't look back, but just goes down the hallway and into the bedroom doorway and disappears. All of us finally exhale and resume our routines, but we don't speak about it for years later. I later find out that my uncle's wife tried to have the house blessed, but I don't know if it ever worked. I stayed there once in college, and I stayed in the basement again, and I wouldn't sleep with the lights out. I just knew deep down in my heart that if I slept in the dark that I would wake up to something very unpleasant. I opened the door to my back porch once at like 4 in the morning to what appeared to be an Amazon jungle. We had one of those bug zapper lights, the blue ones. It had been going crazy with buzzes, like it was buzzing constantly. No big deal, not usually. Bugs love that stuff, they're stupid. I had stayed up late because I was doing something super nerdy that won't get into, and had looked out my screen window to see this enormous spider, like the size of my hand, the regular size of a tarantula, maybe. I had never seen one before and got to be uneasy. So I went to the porch to see what all the fuss was about, and I opened the door to hundreds of bugs, massive bugs covering the porch, the light, the walls too of the house. All shapes and sizes, I've never seen so many. And bugs kept zapping themselves on the light, giant moths whose flapping wings made them look like flames the size of my fist. The noise was this unforgettable skittering sound, like thousands of those spiders in Minecraft, but nothing was moving except those bugs zapping themselves to death. There was nothing I could do. They didn't seem to know I was there, and I didn't want to know what would happen if they did. I closed the door and went to bed. Going to sleep was easy. I think my brain was overloaded with what it saw. I knew I could deal with it in the morning, tell my mom, whatever. But the next morning, there was no evidence that anything was there, and every night after never got that festive. No one said anything about it, and I never brought it up to them. And I never saw a giant spider ever again or anything like it ever again. I've heard sometimes that you can transport to a different place and time on Earth, to a world that's both alien and surreal. I wonder if that happened to me at all, or if I just hallucinated the whole thing. I like the supernatural explanation better. Was 8 years old. Had 3 older sisters and the oldest had the single bedroom that was upstairs. Was an old house, and there was probably 12 wooden steps to get to the landing of the upstairs. At the top there was storage area, very dimly lit by a single hanging light bulb, and there was a wall in the back with a door in the middle, and behind that door was her bedroom. My oldest sister was 14 then. On a few occasions she would come down and stay in my other sister's room because of noises she heard. The noises became soft voices, and once that started she never slept alone upstairs. There was always an uneasy feeling when we were up there. It always felt strange. The bedroom was soon abandoned. My stepfather decided to remodel and tear her bedroom out and eventually add a bathroom and another bedroom. Eventually there were 2x4s up indicating the rooms, but with no drywall. Just boards which allowed you to see the entire layout. In what was to be a new bedroom, we had a mattress on the floor, a small table next to it on which stood a lamp. One weekend my stepsister stayed the night. Her, my middle sister Pam and myself went up there to play 45s on the record player and hang out and sleep. I was 8, Pam and her was 12 then. We were winding down to sleep and laying on the mattress. I was on the far left and they were to my left. For once I wasn't afraid to be upstairs. We were talking and laughing and actually there was no uneasy feelings at all. It was nice. We kept the lamp on which was on the other side of the mattress. The 2 girls were talking about normal stuff. I was laying there listening and looking over to where my oldest sister's room was. There were boards on the floor and boxes cluttering the area. The lamp wasn't a bright one, and as you looked over into the back of the old bedroom it was more shadowy. But you could still see well. For once I wasn't afraid and things felt normal. As they continued to chat I gazed again into my sister's old room, and standing behind a box was a dark-haired woman in a white gown. I immediately froze and looked away. I remember my heart pounding as I turned away from what I was seeing. I laid there panicked and told myself, wait, maybe it was a shadow of something. I decided I had to look back to confirm it wasn't real. I turned my head back to the left and she was still standing there. No expression. Just silently looking at us 3. My sisters were lost in conversation, and I bolted up screaming and running downstairs to pound on my mom and stepdad's door full of hysteria. The girls ran down after me scared because of my actions. I didn't say anything. Just screamed and ran. My stepfather went up to check it out and of course he saw nothing. I'm not one to believe in ghosts. I do believe in demons. That's far scarier. The woman was vivid and not an hallucination. I was wide awake and I looked back to confirm. It never happened again, nor have I ever experienced anything like that since. People were always hearing noises upstairs and there was always a feeling of foreboding. The rooms were never finished. After this episode, my mother started feeling her blankets being slowly pulled off her as she slept while my stepfather was working and us kids were off to school. We moved less than a year later. Nothing happened at our new house. I was a camp counselor at a very old girls' boarding school in the US. We had the obligatory doors slamming, random sounds, leaving something somewhere and it showing up somewhere else, etc. But there was also some actual scary and creepy stuff that I will never be able to forget. I remember leaving the computer lab, which was ironically located in the oldest building on campus. When you walked out of that room you turned left down a long narrow hallway and at the end there was a flight of stairs going down to an open foyer with an exterior door. I turned down the hallway and there was a girl walking about 10 feet in front of me. She had on a uniform which was odd. It was summer, but didn't really alarm me until I realized it looked nothing like the uniforms the regular students wore, but it did look a lot like the ones the girls in photos from the 1910s and 1920s wore. She walked all the way to the top of the stairs and then stopped. Instead of going down the stairs, she looked back down the hallway straight through me and then dove over the railing down into the foyer. When I got to the top of the stairs, there was no one around and no indication that anyone had been there. There was also a dance studio above the auditorium that everyone insisted was haunted, and for good reason. A woman had been raped and murdered by a house parent in that room in the 1950s, and people, often jokingly, said they could sometimes see her. This happened before the hallway incident and I had never taken any of that seriously. I had a group of about 8-9-year-old campers with me, and we walked into what I can only describe as an absolute bloodbath. Streaks across the mirrors and windows, blood pooling on the floor, Clumps of hair still stuck to scalp all over the place, and the body of a teenage girl crumpled in the corner. I didn't scream, but I gasped out loud and really quickly pushed all of my campers back into the hallway. The instructor was just walking up at that point and she asked me what was wrong. I tried to articulate what I saw, but I was very confused by my campers' total lack of fear. Turns out I was the only one who saw the mess. 2 minutes later we all went back into the room and all of it was gone. The school archives had newspaper clippings from that murder and what I saw corresponded with the photos, minus the body in the corner. I still have nightmares about that sometimes. Those are probably the scariest experiences I had in my 3 summers working there. Not sure this fits, as it's more something that I experienced, however there was a real-life element to the experience. About 20 plus years ago, I'm 60 now, I was assistant manager for a newspaper group and my boss was going through a tough time. His wife had left him and he was struggling with it. He was drinking a lot, and would go visit doctors asking for pethidine for what he was saying were headaches, but he confided he just wanted to be numb. Yeah, I tried talking to him, but he said he was fine and things would get better over time. Anyway, one Saturday night I had this bizarre dream/nightmare. In the dream I'm in my house and there is loud knocking at the door. I hear my boss screaming at me, "Let me in, for God's sake, you must let me in." He was calling my name and asking over and over for me to open the front door and let him in. In the dream I see my hand reaching for the door handle, but a voice inside me says with authority but with a soft voice, "Do not do it. Do not open the door." This stops me, the voice is like. It's like someone with knowledge warning me that this will be a bad thing to do. I have no idea who or what this is. But again, my boss is now begging and my hand again reaches forward, but again the voice warns me. I pull back my hand and the dream ends. I wake up and it's so real. I'm sitting in bed and I remember the details vividly. Next to me my wife is sleeping and I look at the clock on my bedside table and it's around 3 a.m. Eventually I go back off to sleep. In the morning we take a long drive to the coast and it's a good day. My health had been struggling a bit with stress etc., but this day was good. I felt fine and enjoyed the time with the family. We arrived home around 4 p.m. in the afternoon and there is a voice message on my answering machine. Remember, this is over 20 years ago. The message is from one of our office girls, the one who was the PA to my boss. The message is, "Jack, not my real name, I've got bad news, Philip, not my boss's real name, died last night. Around 3 a.m. at the hospital." I just found it really strange. I had such an intense and realistic dream about him and the content of the dream has stayed with me till this day. Almost felt like that someone in my dream was holding me back from making a very bad mistake. This happened a couple years back. I was backpacking in Northern California, Shasta Trinity Wilderness area, and had already set up camp for the night. I'm a pretty experienced hiker and have seen/heard some shit in my time out there, bears and the like, saw what I assumed to be a cult compound once, so I'm not fazed super easily. Back to the story though, I was camped up by this lake drinking some cocoa and putting my fire out before crashing for the night when I hear this blood-curdling scream from across the lake. It was like nothing I had ever heard before or since, so I was obviously a little on edge. I decided it would be wiser not to fall into horror movie tropes and investigate it, so I very quickly put out my fire and got into my sleeping bag. No tent, we go ultralight or we don't go at all, and try and ignore the noise and put it out of my mind. Sometime later, maybe 3 a.m.? I really couldn't tell at the time. I heard some rustling in the branches nearby and then another scream from across the water. At this point I was sufficiently freaked out, so I stuffed my shut into my backpack and skedaddled to find a place where I could crash just off the trail nearby. It was the PCT, so there's loads of little bivouac spots dotted all around it. I spent the rest of the night there and in the morning I went back to check. Sure enough, the spot where I was at looked like a windstorm had passed through. Branches were scattered everywhere and it was just hella unsettling. I don't really know what it was, but I just know that it wasn't another person or an animal for certain. Nothing could have made a sound like that. I was at a friend's house out in the middle of nowhere. Old big farm and a huge house. We had a really nice evening there, but every time I walked up the stairs to the second floor where we were gonna sleep that night I felt a weird and creepy feeling. I dismissed it until we decided to go to sleep in her bedroom. My 2 friends fell asleep in 2 seconds. I didn't sleep a wink that night, because for some reason it felt like someone was watching me. It kept feeling like someone was standing at the edge of stairs just staring at me basically, and I didn't dare to either open my eyes or move the whole bloody night. The next morning as we walked down to breakfast I casually asked my friend if someone has ever died or anything in the house. She thought about it for a while and then said that well, the only one she knows about is the previous owner who fell down from the stairs and died. Haha, creeped me out to the fucking core. The second thing that has happened to me was when I still lived at home as a kid. My mom works nights and my brother was away and my dad sleeps in the other side of the house far away from my bedroom. Outside of my room there is a hall, which no one goes into unless they need to get into either mine or my brother's room. Now, as I think most people can do, I can hear whose family member's footsteps it is walking outside of my door just by listening. Now, one night when I was a teenager, and as I said, it was only me and my dad in the house on two opposite ends of the house that night. Anyways, I'm laying in bed, closing my eyes and getting ready to fall asleep when I all of a sudden hear these loud footsteps going from the other end of the hall to standing just outside my room. My door is closed and I just have a feeling that that was the only thing making whatever it was not being able to get in. I sit up in bed, scared absolutely shitless, because I know for a fact it's not my father, by the sound of the footsteps but also because it sounds like the person is wearing huge boots or something. The steps keep repeating for a couple of minutes back and forth until it just suddenly disappears, and after that I've never ever heard it again. I asked my father if he was for some random reason running around in the house the morning after, and he just looked at me with a confused face and said no, of course not. So yay, who knows him? Me and the wife went for a walk after it rained. It was around 11 a.m. so it was dark out and we had our flashlights with us to see if any washes were running. We lived next to a school and it had a nasty wash that ran through the baseball field they had in the back of the school grounds. We walked to the back road that went to the bridge that went over the wash. While we walked down this road we saw some very tall black thing standing next to a stop sign. It was taller than the stop sign by a foot or two and it was just standing there looking at us. Couldn't make out any human features and couldn't see any clothing. It was just a solid black mass, but we knew it was looking at us by how its body was. My wife stopped as soon as she saw it and I told her I see it too. She wanted to go back but I really wanted to see the wash. We live in Arizona so running water is like gold to us. I pulled her along with me and we walked towards it. We got about 15 feet from it before we blinked and the damn thing disappeared. We had our flashlights but they sucked ass so they didn't reach more than 10 feet before it went black again. We never got to see what the hell it was. It never got clearer as we got closer, it was just pitch black the whole time we walked up. Didn't move at all the whole time as well. We were scared by it and felt very threatened by it. It didn't seem like it wanted to be our friend. I live in a house built in the 70s, there is a story about the first people who lived here. The husband had killed his wife in the living room, nailing her to the back of the living room wall, specifically. That just starts all the shit. 4, maybe 5 years ago? My brother, who lived in the loft above the garage, which wasn't connected to the house, had brought home a girl and every day when he came home from work, she would be sitting on the floor with candles in a box. When they had broken up, my brother noticed a lot of weird shit. Like seeing a shadow in the corner of his room, or waking up to it in his face. He would hear late at night someone running full speed up and down the steps. He would wake up with bruises on his arms and legs. We figured it was a demon, and my family being Catholic, had given him blessed rosaries to hang on the ceiling. They would swing rapidly randomly. It got so bad and attached to my brother that it would follow him wherever he went. He would even sleep down in the living room some nights because he was so afraid. He finally moved out and it hasn't bothered him, because it stays in the loft. To add, this year my stepsister moved into the loft and she would experience the exact same thing my brother did. She would come down every morning telling me how she slept with scissors to protect herself. Another story, my daughter who is 3 now would see a man in the house. When I was a waitress, I would come home late and some nights she would wait up for me. One night, I was sitting at the table counting my tips while she was playing in the living room. Next thing I know she runs into the kitchen, grabbing me, hiding, saying, "Mommy, there's a man in there." So I got up, walked to the entrance of the living room, and she behind my leg pointed to the corner and said, "There he is," but no one was there. I instantly picked her up and ran into my room and locked the door. I stayed up all night that night. Some nights I would wake up to my baby crying hysterically, pointing to the corner of my room saying that the man is in our room. She would see him outside in our backyard too. Her and I were walking around the backyard with her baby and stroller. She stops dead in her tracks, and does this little finger motion to the shed. And I said, "What, baby? You seen something? You sensed something?" And she replies to me, "No, Mommy, the man lives in there. He doesn't like the house so he lives in the shed." I picked her up so fast and went into the house. That was the last time I ever heard of the man. So, I live in a little old town in Denmark called Roslf. It's a small city with around 1,500 people populated in the area. We live in a house that was built in 1879. I was about 7 to 8 years old and my mom tucked me into bed with the door open behind her, and whilst she had her back to the door, I saw a shadow with a face and dark eyes looking straight at me, and waving at me. When I saw it, I just froze and couldn't move or say anything. My mom thought I had a seizure and was really worried. 11 years later, I still haven't told her about the episode, because at first, I thought I just saw something random, maybe a guy just standing and watching, but the more time passed, the more details have been applied somehow, probably because I'm thinking in a different way than what I used to do in my younger age. However, now I am 100% certain that whatever it was definitely not human. It was dark outside and the whole thing, from the chest and up, was pitch black, but you could notice the black eyes and the webby face it had. It's so hard to explain, but you could definitely see the difference between a regular guy at night and then this thing. From that point of my life, I've always locked my doors whenever I go to sleep, and I just have this fear. But it's been better the past few years, and my parents have set this house on sale, and I just can't wait to move on from here. Not me, but my brother told me this the other day. Apparently he was planning on getting an upside down cross tattooed on him, dumb idea already, and to make sure he liked it, he drew a mock-up version in Sharpie where he wanted it, on his side, right underneath his armpit. Well, after about a week of having it on, he wakes up at 3 in the morning, very suddenly, and shoots up in his bed, not feeling groggy or tired in the slightest. He sits there for half a second before running out of his room into the bathroom to wash off the tattoo because he said it felt like it was on fire, and not his whole body, just the tattoo. He said he could clearly feel the outline of the cross burning into his skin. And the pain it was causing him made him start to cry. He said it was like nothing he's ever felt before, and he described it as true fear and agony. Eventually, he grabbed some rubbing alcohol and a cloth and got it off, but after that he said he didn't sleep for the rest of the night and had the lights on the whole time until he had to go to school. He hasn't told this to anyone else besides me because he thought people would think he's crazy, but the whole time he was telling me he had goosebumps and we both felt as if there was something else in the room with us.